joint meeting between Adult Select and Strong Communities Select committees. We've done this before, where we have topics of close interest to both committees, and I'm very pleased that people have been able to come today. There are one or two kind of housekeeping things to say before we start. We are being recorded and we are being live streamed via YouTube. So you've got a choice on YouTube of either this or the new U2 album. But in any case, please bear that in mind as we go forward so that we use our microphones, please. And with that in mind, I'd like to do what we did this morning in Children and Young People and take the opportunity to ask people to introduce themselves so that we're all clear who is here and what their particular role is. The first item on your agenda, though, you'll notice, is election of chairman. And in the pre-meeting, there seemed to be a consensus that I would take the chair on this occasion and that Simon would be my co-pilot, helping me to make sure that I don't miss people who want to join in and ask questions. If that is a satisfactory arrangement for members, would you signify getting readings on nodometers and on hands? That seems to be the way to go forward. Thank you very much indeed. So could we then briefly introduce ourselves? There's no need to do a short sketch or mime to show what you do. Should we go from here round? Simon?
Yep, Simon Howarth, Chairman of Strong Communities.
Peter Farley, Chairman of Adult Select.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services Officer.
Yeah, it's Lindsay Stewart from the Housing Options team.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ian Ferguson, also from Housing Options.
Thank you. Might as well go with you two gentlemen next and then back round.
Sues the mic. Richard Davis, Head of Revenues and Benefits at Torbine and Head of the Benefits Service, Monmouthshire.
And I'm Ian Bakewell, Housing and Communities Manager now for Monmouthshire.
Councillor Ruth Edwards, Select Member for Lintilio Cresceni, and I sit on the Adult Select and the Strong Communities Select.
Councillor Alan Wintle, Drivage Ward in Monmouth. I'm Adults.
Delia Hudson, Adult Select Committee, Co-opted Member.
Councillor Tony Easton, Deuce Ward Caldecott. I'm a member of the Strong Communities Select Committee.
Paul Jordan, Councillor Ford Abergavenny. I'm on both Adult Select and Strong Communities.
To leave us actually during the proceedings, and we will understand why that is so. That's Councillor Edwards and Councillor Jordan have both signalled that they may need to leave proceedings before we conclude them. Ian, welcome. Welcome
Chair,
back.
we got apologies.
Oh, yes. Do we have apologies, Richard? Thank you. Thank you, Tony.
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillors Harris, Hickman and from Mr D Hill.
Can I make a comment?
Please do.
I'm rather concerned that this is an important session, that we are short on the ground yet again of councillors. We've reduced councillor members of select committees to 9. How much further are we going to go down to make sure we've got quorum? I don't know. I feel that councillors are not putting enough effort in.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. I'm sure we note your comments. So we've had apologies from some members, but not all. Is that right, Richard?
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Ian, I'm going to ask you to take us into your report, but before you do so, and bearing in mind that you've got colleagues here and you're welcome, one and all, thank you. We wondered if you could just remind us what the setup is for the homeless prevention team. Not all members may be as familiar with it as others. Would you mind doing that as a bit of an opener?
It's all actually all part of my presentation. Sorry? So it's all part of my presentation. Then I anticipated that obviously there was some of this might be new. So if you're happy for me to go straight into it.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thanks for having me back again. What I was going to do today, again, probably for the benefit of stronger communities, this agenda item really has come up with a view to reviewing how we were progressing with homeless performance. Homeless performance has been on the agenda and the work plan of the committee for a little while, and so this is like the cyclical update. So today, so what I was looking to do is remind you of the current context, the working arrangements that we've got, and in the context of homeless prevention, why this is so important and so relevant. And as part of that, I'll just give you an overview of how we deliver the service and how we're structured. I'll go into the current situation in terms of our current performance. So I've got plenty of stats for you, and an update on the budget position, bearing in mind that one of the council's cabinet project mandates falls to me, so that's relevant. And in terms of the way we've been working and the way we've been trying to tackle homelessness and improve prevention, give you a feel of some of the things that we've done and are doing, and hopefully conclude with give you a bit of a feel of where I consider the continued barriers and risks still remain. So, as requested, this is not a new slide to adults, but hopefully this will be useful for stronger communities. As we sit here at the moment, we've got a team of 4.5, or 4.8 to be precise. So we've got an options team manager, which is Karen Durant. We're carrying a vacancy at the moment, which we've carried for over a year now, and that's obviously been to support the budget. We've got 3 housing options officers, Ian being one of them, and a private sector liaison officer, which is Lindsay. The options team officers are very focused on the actual assessment process, and dealing with actual homelessness and the prevention, so actually dealing with the applications themselves. And Lindsay, in theory, her role is about accommodation in the widest sense, but in reality gets quite polarised in relation to our shared housing. So there's if you like, a capacity issue in terms of Lindsay's actual role. Going into actually the functions, as I've said, general housing advice, the bog standard housing applications. We're required to investigate those applications by law. We're doing more and more in terms of homeless prevention, and as I say, we've got a responsibility to provide accommodation. Some is interim accommodation while we investigate people's circumstances, and others, if we accept a responsibility, We provide temporary accommodation, and that essentially falls to Lindsay, particularly the hostel management and the lodging and the shared housing. Albeit we don't deliver the housing register directly, that's a responsibility of Monmouthshire Housing, but it's essentially the council's register, it's our policy, so we've got a responsibility to support that process. So Care and the manager particularly picks up that side of things, and we regularly get involved with queries about where am I on the list, when am I going to get rehoused. And of course, statistics. I think of all the teams, there's just loads of statistics that we have to provide to various people, mostly on a quarterly basis. But there is a whole raft, so we do have a little mini industry in terms of producing those. Now that's the current situation, and again, adults will be aware that we're actually on the cusp of a change, and we are merging our housing options team with Torvine's housing options team. We're co-located, the two housing services are co-located in Pontypool, and all being well during November, those two teams, the two housing options teams for each authority, will come together as one service. There's a report going to Cabinet next week, hopefully to rubber stamp that and approve the structure, which is not particularly technical and not particularly complicated, but broadly speaking, we're looking to create two new teams under the banner of a housing solutions service. There'll be a housing solutions team, which is pretty much the same as the housing options team is at the moment, and that will be made up of our staff and Torvine staff. And we're also we've built into the structure a temporary housing support officer, again, which is going to be very focused on prevention work. But the subtle difference will be the establishment of a new private sector housing team. And at the moment, if you like, our private sector housing team at the moment is Lindsay. Torvine have got two staff, and Lindsay will be coming together with two other people. Plus, we're looking to create a fourth post, which will probably be done as a secondment. So, in terms of private sector housing, we'll have a considerable additional resource to go into that, and obviously by combining the two services together, it will create a lot more flexibility and will be a lot more resilient. So, and I say, all being well, that's scheduled to start in November, but it's obviously subject to Cabinet approval. And again, this is the current situation. Just to give you a feel of what accommodation that we've got available to us. We've got one hostel in Monmouth, 5 bedrooms, which is an invaluable resource and well used. Obviously, the disadvantage with that hostel is it being based in Monmouth. It's not always helpful for people living from the other towns, but that's the resource we've got. And we use that as a family hostel, and it's used as an emergency hostel. So we always try and keep rooms there, and if we can move people on as quickly as possible, that is always the aim. And I think generally that works pretty well. We've now got a lodging and shared housing scheme, and it says 2 units there. Well, it's not 2; it's actually 21. So apologies for that. That's a scheme that Lindsay's been building up over the last year, and that's worked really, really well for us. It's provided direct accommodation for us, and it's bringing us in some much needed income. We've got a private leasing scheme, which is run by Mellin. It used to be our scheme, but we transferred that to Mellin a couple of years ago. And the actual numbers, it's actually less than that. I've copy and pasted that from a previous presentation. It's actually near 90 units. But again, that's a very, very important service for us. And the core of our clients that we do need to provide accommodation do rely on that service. And then on top of that, so we've got the Solace Hostels, Hill House and Woodstock in Abergwenny and Chepstow, and Solace have also got a few move-on flats in Chepstow. Monmouthshire Housing have bought us a couple of units that we're able to use, and of course there's always bed and breakfast that we can access should we need to, and unfortunately we've obviously had to rely on that quite considerably over the years. Homeless at home status, I've put that up. That basically what that means is where we've accepted a duty to somebody and they've agreed to stay at home. I think the thing with that is a practice that we're trying to eliminate and pretty much are eliminating, because I think there's argued there's contrived homelessness behind that. And obviously everybody is aspiring for a social housing property, and that's ultimately where the vast majority of people will end up being accommodated. And lastly, private rented accommodation, which we're trying to increase the use of. So that's our accommodation at the moment, and obviously in relation to us merging with Torvine, we will be able to access their pool of accommodation. So we'll put it all in the same bucket and be able to use it. So again, it creates more flexibility and resilience. So this slide, what I've tried to reflect from this slide is how we broadly prevent homelessness. So right at the core of that, obviously we've got the housing options team. And around the options team, there's a raft of services. Some work very well, some work okay, and some don't work very well at all. But the services around the team obviously are critical to supporting the staff in the team, particularly around the prevention. So the ones I've highlighted in green work extremely well for us. So the one on the left, the prevention fund, so we've got a pot of money that we use to pay deposits, possibly assist with arrears, fees for estate agents, anything that we can use cash basically to prevent homelessness with. But the vast majority of it goes towards accessing the private rented sector. Over on the right, discretionary housing payments. I've put that in green because Richard was coming today. So, no, Richard's been incredibly supportive of the team and the housing benefit colleagues. Obviously, Richard's got a report to follow myself. And again, that's another pot of money that is available to all agencies in Monmouthshire, not just the housing options team. And again, the emphasis is on preventing homelessness. And we've negotiated and agreed procedures with Richard, which has made a big difference and brought considerable resource to the options team. And the family mediation service, Bartholomew, they're co-located, they share the same office as us, and there's a family mediation worker who deals with all applications from young people, so particularly 16 and 17, and that's been really helpful in terms of the capacity of the team. So the likes of Ian and his colleagues don't generally need to get involved with younger people. They're able to pass that to the worker who runs with it, and particularly liaises very closely with children's services. And then over in the left-hand corner, I've mentioned the shared housing, 21 units. And I didn't really expect this to pan out quite as well, but we are getting people coming to us, and we are literally able to prevent their homelessness by accommodating them directly into the shared housing scheme. So I won't go into all of them, but there's a range, and there'll be a few others of lesser impact. This one actually goes into a little bit more detail about the types of services that are provided, and some of them are pretty much the same as on the last slide. But the bond scheme, which probably most of you are familiar with, provided by Serin, again, very, very important resource for the team, and the particular member of staff that coordinates the bond scheme goes beyond the call of duty in terms of the service that she provides, the assistance she provides the team, and basically what she brings to Monmouthshire. So we're actually very, very fortunate there. I don't think there's anything else there that's on. Obviously, the housing associations in the bottom right-hand corner, the RSLs. Obviously, they've got a key role in terms of how they manage their stocks. Obviously, we expect them to be responsible in how they manage their properties and not evict people willy-nilly, and basically doing everything to prevent homelessness, which they do. They are focused on sustaining tenancies. And just another point, the private leasing scheme there over on the left, provided by Mellin, that originally was temporary accommodation to discharge our homeless duty. But increasingly now, Mellin have been very helpful in terms of converting some of those units into assured short hold tenancies. So it's almost like a find a tenant scheme. A tenant goes into a property, and then Mellin will facilitate establishing a tenancy with the private landlord, and that's a growing arrangement, but it's certainly bringing something to the table for us. So why is all this relevant? The main reason at the moment is homelessness is a statutory duty. Don't need to tell you that. And come April, the new Wales Housing Act, that now will require us to prevent homelessness. And the key test will be that we will need to demonstrate as an authority, not as a team, but as an authority, that we are taking reasonable steps to prevent homelessness. And if we're not, obviously there will be scope there for the likes of Shelter to challenge us, and I guess at worst, judicial review. So I don't think we're hopefully in that game. A lot of work being done to prepare for that, and the work that we're doing with Torvine sits under that preparation. And then the other thing that the Housing Act is doing for us, which I think is really helpful for Monmouthshire, is if we want to discharge our homeless duty in the private sector, we have to get explicit agreement from the household. So somebody comes along, we find a private sector property, we say, right, you can have that, and you can have that to discharge your duty. But if they decline it, we can't do anything about it. So that still leaves the responsibility with us to provide them with a permanent accommodation. And the reality of that is they just sit in temporary accommodation until they get to or they're able to bid successfully for a property and they get a social housing property. So come April, we will be able to offer people private sector accommodation and that will discharge our duty. And that should make a significant difference to the duty side of things for the council. And obviously in terms of the bigger picture and single integrated plans and corporate priorities, obviously the homelessness and homeless prevention service sits nicely with that and makes an important contribution. And then lastly at the bottom there, again you will recall we've been audited numerous times by the Welsh Audit Office, and on each occasion there have been risks and concerns identified. So the ongoing work that we're doing, again, hopefully supports their concerns. So going into actual performance, I've not been able to do this for a long while, but I'm actually in a position to say that things are loads better. I feel quite proud actually to actually be able to say that. There's a lot of work gone in over the years, and the team's gone through change after change after change, small changes, big changes, and there does seem to be a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm really pleased to say that we are in a far better position than we've been for quite some number of years. So just going through these, we hadn't used to collate this, but we now record every time that the team is contacted, because not all contact is necessarily results in a homeless application. So last year we got, it's actually 704, not 705, 704 contacts last year, and for some reason that appears to be increasing. We've not really gone into it as yet, but the number of contacts we get in at the moment does seem to be on the increase. But on the decline, the number of homeless applications that we're making decisions on is falling, and the number of people that we're accepting duty on is falling. And may not seem big numbers, but when if you look at the acceptances, from having 220 acceptances in 12-13 to possibly only having to accommodate 150 people this year, or 50 households, 50 families is a lot of people, and they take up a lot of space when it comes to units of accommodation. So that's a significant fall for Monmouthshire. And in conjunction with that now, I've historically reported that our use of bed and breakfast is been quite high, and it's not just the use of it that's frowned upon. Obviously, there's a financial impact in terms of the authority, and obviously there's the wider impacts of, in terms of health, education, by putting people and children into bed and breakfast placements. The vast majority of people that we do accommodate in B&B does tend to be single people, and you'll see from the next point that the families that it's relatively low numbers that we do have to place or have had to place, and I say we're in a unique position at the moment of it being zero at the moment. So hopefully that trend will continue to the end of the year. And I've tried to draw out actually in the report that the people that we have had to place, again there's a rationale. We've either the hostel's full, and what we found is that again there's people that are in employment, so we can try to keep them near their place of work, and B&B has really been the only way we've been able to do that. So obviously we've got a 0 position, no average stay for families at the moment. The one blot on the landscape is our average stay in B&B is on the up. But what I will say is that relates to one household. It's a single person. That's a very challenging case. It's one of the case studies I've drawn out in the report, and it was somebody that was released from prison, that was well known to ourselves and the housing associations. Unfortunately, Mellin Homes felt that they couldn't take the risk to accommodate that person, so the only alternative was to put that person in bed and breakfast. And the irony of it all was that having accommodated that person for 80 days, we didn't end up rehousing them anyway. So, but it was just that one case, and what I've tried to draw out in the report, that it's, you know, it was a really difficult case, very challenging, and it was one of those. Resolving this is difficult. It was an extreme case, but again, it gives you a flavour of the types of cases that the team do get. So in terms of actual prevention, we are again rapidly increasing in terms of the balance that we've got between homelessness. So we're beginning to do less homelessness and more prevention. And as you can see from there now, the number of prevention cases that we're able to get our teeth into, again, is increasing quite considerably, and our success rate is increasing as well. And the all-important statistic is that bottom one, percentage of potentially homeless prevented. That's our statutory indicator. That's so we've reported a very low figure for a number of years, and this year again we've got a big jump, and again I think that's on the back of the success that the team are having in terms of preventing homelessness now. But you'll recall that indicator is one that is collated in different ways by different authorities. So we're confident as an authority that we've produced it as per the guidance, which, and I say one of the consequences of that is it's put us at probably a lower position than a lot of other councils. So, but as things are at the moment, again, we're in a significantly better position, which is obviously very pleasing. Ignore that one, that's a duplicate slide. And then budget. I'm sorry I wasn't able to bring a month 6 figure for you, but this was the position at month 3. Homelessness, we're underspending and continuing to underspend, and that's partly because we've got a vacant post, and partly because we're not spending to the same level on bed and breakfast. And Lindsay's delivering us a significant surplus in relation to the shared housing service. So that's something that's obviously making a big difference. And as I said earlier, we've got a project mandate that requires us to save £55,000 over 3 years, and I can confidently say that as things are at the moment, we will achieve that saving. So just to give you a feel of some of the things that we've been doing, I say this is by no means an exhaustive list. just to draw out some of them. Probably one of the big ones that we still haven't really finished it is the reconfiguration of how we deliver the service. But that really has been about trying to increase staff capacity. So it talks about a 4 work stream. The work streams are, one, there's an online assessment. And the idea of that online assessment is that if in the middle of the night you suddenly found yourself homeless, or you want to get a feel of what assistance the council would provide you, you could go online and do an assessment. Unfortunately, still can't get that sorted, so that's still outstanding. But what we have done, we now operate a duty system whereby all initial contacts with clients is over the telephone, and there's an initial conversation, and at that point we try and resolve that case there and then over the phone. And if we can't, the rest of the team, or certainly 2 of the other team, are behind the scenes to pick up the more complex work and doing, investigating type work, and if needs be, if a visit's necessary or whatever. But the more involved stuff, and that has worked very well. And the 4th part of that is create a private rented hub, and that probably sounds a bit grand, having just one person doing that. But the principle is there in terms of how we're working. There's we are focused a lot more on the private sector, and we will use this model when we come together with Torvine. So, we will have a hub. I've mentioned the DHP with Richard. As I said, Richard's been brilliant in terms of supporting that. We've got the allocation policy for the housing register. Again, that was reviewed over a year ago now, but that resulted in more people being assisted. But that needs reviewing again. And the gateway, the housing support gateway, again, I don't know how many of you are familiar, but we have a number of housing support services within Monmouthshire. My team, or part of my team, coordinates the access to that and provides an assessment service. And then they signpost and refer them on to a number of different agencies. And a year or so ago, the team did a lot of work to, again, increase capacity, and that did result in the team being able to deal with a lot more people. The number of referrals into the scheme went from something like 600 to 900. So they were dealing with significantly a lot more people. I've talked about the shared housing and the work that we've been doing with Torvine. Again, that's just a sample of, well, they're the key areas that we've been working jointly with Torvine, which they won't necessarily have had a direct contribution in terms of prevention, but a couple of those have made a difference in terms of the budget, the joint out of hours and the furniture storage. That's saved us money, and the joint landlord hub. Again, I can't hang my hat on anything specifically, but the emphasis of the landlord's hub, and I know Councillor Smith has been before. But the point of the landlord's hub is, again, it's been all about trying to encourage private landlords to get involved with the council, rather than and share information. Again, something that Richard's been very supportive of. And then the last thing I've put on there, a few years ago, we asked Charter Housing Association, or Seren, to establish a letting agency for us. And they did a lot of work. You may well have seen in the one-stop shops their livery and signs that we've been encouraging them to raise awareness of their existence. Unfortunately, that service hasn't brought anything to the table at all. We've had 1 or 2 properties but again, you recall, I think a previous couple of committees, I brought a number of photographs of properties that have been referred to us, and essentially they're wrong type, wrong place, and probably more importantly, too expensive. So that's been unfortunate. But that agency still exists, and I guess they will carry on, for their own business purposes. And what haven't we done? Obviously, I've talked about the new Housing Solutions Service. So all being well, in November that will start. Obviously, we've got high hopes that also will start supporting our figures. I touched on housing support earlier. I'll come back to that, but I think my point that I'm saying there is that there is a housing support service, and what we do need we need that to be really aligned with the homeless prevention service and the expansion of the private rented sector. And that is there's still a big piece of work going on, but I'll come on to that. We've got quite a lot of money coming next year, and I can't remember how much it is, but it's over £100,000 from the Assembly in terms of new burdens money, and we will be looking to use that money to support homeless prevention. So that's going to be great for us. It's 3-year money, which years 2 and 3 gets smaller amounts, so it's like seed funding, but it should make a big impact for us. We believe we can expand the shared housing service, but there is a capacity issue at the moment. So Lindsay at the moment spends the vast majority of her time managing these properties, which is fine. But I say what we really need is Lindsay to be out there developing relationships with private landlords and identifying properties and actually procuring the properties and bringing them in. We've developed an offer for private landlords, and I think it's at the back of the agenda. There's a leaflet, a flyer. That's something that, and it's the root of basically it's the basis of an agency service for the council. It's very, very much in its infancy. So it's quite a rudimentary product at the moment. But the important thing is now we've got something, we've got the core of something to start with, that we can start rolling out, start marketing and start promoting. But it's obviously important that we get the team in place, ready to take any calls before we start doing that. And I've mentioned the allocation policy. So in terms of risks and barriers, I suppose the big unknown is what future demand is going to bring to the table. There's a speculation that the new duty to prevent homelessness will create more demand and have more people knocking on our door. Whether it will or not, I don't know. Whether a number of agencies will use it as an opportunity to challenge us, test that we've got robust procedures in place. I really don't know. I suppose the only thing I can say is that we did anticipate demand to increase on the back of welfare reform, and I don't think that's really panned out. I think we've been quite fortunate. There's still a lot of people out there with debt and those type of issues, but I don't think, like with the bedroom subsidy, we've not had lots of homelessness or as a result on the back of that. So that's positive. But the next question mark is the introduction of universal credit. We're not quite sure when that's going to come in, albeit it sounds as if the rollout's beginning to speed up. Whether that will have an impact, I don't know. We'll see. The The big issue for us in Monmouthshire in terms of the private sector is our private landlords probably don't need the council. We're a high rental area. Private landlords can get a good market rent from professionals commuting to Birmingham, Bristol, Cardiff, wherever. We know that landlords see homeless households as a risk. And I think that goes back to where they're like, such as the Landlords Forum, how important it is. It's about trying to generate trust, familiarity, relationships, whatever. So if we can bring more landlords on board, again, that will be. And again, I think we're in such a position that we don't need. Be careful what I say. I shoot myself in the foot. Just a small change in terms of new landlords being open to working with us and housing our client group will make a big difference. So again, and the signs are that that's beginning to happen, but again, it's still very early days. And it's not just about private landlords themselves; it's about residents out there. Again, anecdotally, I know the team deal with people that have moved, 3 times in the last 18 months because they've only been on 6 months assured tenancies. And they get fed up with it. They get fed up with it, and you cannot blame them for that. So there is a view by a lot of residents that they don't want the private rented sector. They want a social housing because it's good quality, the rent's affordable, and they've got that all-important security. So I guess the challenge is on us to try and persuade landlords, longer tenancies, keep rents down, and be a good landlord. And probably linking with that is this view and attitude that homelessness is a route to social housing. We know that a lot of people do come to us, present themselves as homeless as a way to get a housing association property. And we know that some local agencies do support that. There's, again, it's a hearts and minds thing. It's an attitudinal thing. So, and again, I think I'm confident we are going in the right direction, but it's by no means perfect, and there's still work to do. And lastly, I've put housing support as a potential risk or a barrier. The housing support service is funded through Supporting People, and so there are a number of agencies that provide housing support in Monmouthshire. We've had a number of health checks over the last couple of years. Andy Gale being one of them, who I think a lot of you met. Another chap, Chris Price from the WLGA, and they've come back to us with advice that we could do more with our Supporting People funding. It could be more closely aligned with how we prevent homelessness. And we've been exposed to good practice from other organisations, other councils, and even working with Torvine. They've got financial inclusion officers within their team who are Supporting People funded, and they're a direct resource for the team to go out and prevent homelessness. And what we found is that the housing support agenda is not exactly the same as for a provider. Very, very focused on the individuals, very, very focused on supporting that individual and the well-being. But a driver for them is not like our performance indicator, the prevention of homelessness. And it's really important that we try and get that aligned. And the good news is that supporting people commissioning, again, I think most of you probably know Chris Robinson. Chris has made a proposal to us to assist with that, where there will be a pool of provider staff who will be, better choose my words carefully, but almost on call to the housing options team. So the likes of Ian, got a case comes in, there's a number of options how that person can be assisted, and one of them would be to say, right, well, a referral to a housing support agency to, run with whatever. So that's a model that it doesn't exist at the moment, but all being well will be up and running over the next few months, hopefully by April at the absolute latest. And I think the proposal there is as well that the staff they take on financial, become accredited, so they can provide money advice as well. So they can get involved with loans and debt and whatever. So I'm very optimistic about that proposal, but that's one that's beginning to emerge. But so I've put it down because as things are at the moment, I think compared with a lot of authorities, we would be missing a trick if this doesn't evolve. And that's homeless prevention.
Thank you very much, Ian. 2 for the price of 1, I think. A long, well-prepared paper and a long, well-prepared presentation. We now need to try and tie the 2 together, and thank you very much for leading us to this point. I know that members have a number of questions already in their mind, and I think we're going to start with Councillor Eason, Tony Eason.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Good report. I go back to the first slide. You were talking about the provision of properties within Monmouthshire. You don't seem to mention many facilities in the Caldecott area. You use the word Chepstow. I don't know whether that includes Caldecott. But I suppose you're aware that Stowe House in Caldecott, which you've used for a while, is now going to be developed into domestic properties. That will leave a hole in the market, or I use market is the wrong word, but it'll leave a hole in the facilities in Caldecott. I'm aware that there may be 2 people living rough in Caldecott Country Park at the moment. The weather's been fine recently, but you're going to find that the next number of months it's going to change. What was the rationale behind losing the Stowe House? Did you have any say in the matter?
No, the Stowe Guest House is it's private property, private bed and breakfast that has been very supportive of us in terms of assisting us over the years, and they've just decided that they don't want to do any more, and have put the property up for sale. I mean, what I want to be able to say and hope I can be confident in saying is that albeit they've provided us with a lot of assistance over the years, we won't need it going forward. So we've not placed anybody there for quite some time, and long may that continue, really. So,
all right, Councillor Penny-Jones, please.
Thank you, Ian. I've got 2 questions, in fact, but the first one, it just sparked something in my thoughts about it. You said about deliberate homelessness at one time, and I was just thinking about, I think it was a myth, but I'd just like you to comment on it, about young girls getting pregnant to be able to get a flat. Could you tell me about this, please, and whether it is true, or whether they go onto a list, or what's behind that myth?
I've got no evidence whatsoever to suggest that that happens. Albeit I know it's quite often throwaway comments made along those lines. But what we're pretty confident about, that there is contrived homelessness, and people do people do come to us, particularly from family settings, and say, you know, my mum's chucking me out, or my relatives chucking me out, and it's virtually impossible to disprove. What I would say now is we're taking a little bit more of a I was going to use the word hardline, that's the wrong word, but more of a questioning response to people coming. So rather than accept it at face value, you know, we will challenge and ask the questions. But you know, at the end of the day, if a mom says they're chucking somebody out, there's probably not a lot we can do.
And can I ask the second part of my question, which isn't related, I may add? The new act bill that's coming in on April of 2015, the third key change, the three key changes, and the third one says the change in the priority needs status of those homeless leaving prison. What change? What change from what?
At the moment, prison leavers, we've got a legal duty. They're classed as being in priority need by virtue of the fact that they are prison leavers, and I think that's got a historic context of, you know, in terms of community safety, and so we've got no choice with prison leavers, but the legislation's changing it now, and we would only accept a prison leaver if they were considered vulnerable. So and it is a problem. Prison leavers are a challenge to accommodate, you know, for a range of reasons, and again, it's a lot harder to place some prison leavers, and there's a lot of restrictions from the Public Protection Unit.
So can I just say one thing? Surely they're all going to be classified as vulnerable. It's going to be very hard to distinguish, isn't it?
Well, there is case law. There is a what's the word? Yeah, go on. Yeah, go on.
Just to expand on what Ian was just saying, the priority need for prison leavers was originally a Welsh directive. It was not part of the nationwide English and Welsh Housing Act. The idea was that by offering the priority, there was more likelihood of rehabilitating ex-offenders. Evidence has shown that the effect of this has not been to the extent that was originally hoped. And the effect of rehousing prisoners and giving priority has caused more animosity amongst the general public than it's actually promoted the rehabilitation. So it will be removed. The bill in 2015 allows for ex-offenders who are vulnerable in another context to still have that priority need, but they wouldn't automatically have it as a prison leaver.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Sue White.
Caught me out there. This was good news, the numbers that you have dealt with and have improved. Can I ask you, what do you think that's attributed to? I know it's hard work by the team, but do you think having private landlords more amicable to having our needy, do you think that has helped, or what would you attribute that to, please?
I'd say it's a contribution, a combination of things. I mean, the private landlords that we work with undoubtedly bring something to the table, and no question about it. And I say the shared housing service particularly has made a difference. But the other part of it as well is that the team worked differently. You know, 3-4 years ago, you know, the focus was on homelessness, and prevention was probably a smaller part of the work. You know, we were very, very conscious that homelessness was that was the statutory responsibility, and it was suppose it was changing that balance from homeless work to prevention work, and while you're fighting one fire, it's difficult to start dealing with the other. So I would suggest they were probably the main reasons.
I've got
Do
one
you want
more
to come back on that?
query. Yes, thank you. I can see a great difference, and perhaps the 29,000 will help, as you say, to boost that you got from the government. Now, here it says on my page 11, 8 cases were hospital discharges. Now, that's really thrown me. I really can't understand why someone goes into hospital and comes out homeless.
I couldn't give you any detail on those particular cases. I don't know whether Ian's got any recollection.
It's quite a large number, you see. That's why I'm asking.
Hospital leavers who are leaving after a long stay in an institution such as a hospital are deemed to be in priority need, once again. So in some of the instances, this may have been an existing homeless individual who had no vulnerability, who may have then found themselves admitted to hospital for another reason, and ultimately will then come out with a priority need.
So you're saying they didn't have a home before they went into hospital?
Quite possibly, or they may have been no fixed abode and staying with family and friends here and there, and upon discharge from hospital they need something more stable.
Thank you. Councillor Val Smith, then Councillor Paul Jordan.
In your work, gentlemen, have you established how many empty properties there are within Monmouthshire and Torfaen as part of your preventative scheme?
Yes, we've got a list, and I couldn't tell you what it is. I mean, it's a few hundred in Monmouthshire. I mean, sorry? Yeah. I mean, the reality is, what we're finding is, funnily enough, I've sent out some letters this morning to people. We get a list from. We've got a list of empty properties, and we write to them and say, look, we notice your property's empty, and it's been empty for a little while, and we give them the options, or some of the options that are available to them, whether it's working with us or selling or becoming a landlord, whatever. We get a lot of flack back from those letters because they come back and say they're partnering in an estate, so they're waiting for the estate to be settled, or they're waiting for it to be sold, or whatever. So we've not had a great deal of joy with the contact that we're having in relation to empty properties. I think what we find is that, I suppose, Monmouthshire is fortunate in one sense that we don't have those empty properties that are, falling down and are a blight or a problem on the local community. Yes, there are unquestionably a wasted resource, if you like, but I say the reality is we do find that a lot of the contact we do have is because the property's pending, say, going to be sold or whatever. So.
Some authorities are using an initiative whereby funding for vacant properties in poor condition, so basically not high value properties, making the funding available, selling at a nominal price and getting them back and occupied. Do we have any initiative like that?
Well, the main initiative that or if you like, the big initiative is we participate in the Welsh Government Empty Homes Loan Scheme, houses to homes. So there's a pot of money that is available for owners in Monmouthshire that they can access to bring properties up to a lettable standard, and we have had take up from that scheme, but it's not been a big scheme. And there's another raft of funding coming next year for, and it's called private. I think it's called the private sector loan So that will be wider still, whereby somebody with a private owner will be able to access a loan through the council to carry out work on their property. So again, I'm quite keen to try and link that with private landlords. So if a private landlord's willing to support us, can we, facilitate access to this loan scheme? But again, on the back of the empty homes loans, I'm not sure how interested people are going to be, and it's quite difficult to. It's not as, it's on a par with a bank loan. It's not massively different, so it's quite difficult to say that it's it's significantly better than a bank loan, because of course interest rates are pretty low anyway at the moment. So, but we do promote that scheme in our literature. So,
Councillor Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, generally a very good report. 2 questions. I'll keep it to 2 questions, although there are a number of questions I would like to ask, but we're limited by time. The first is the hidden homeless. There are homeless people within Monmouthshire who do not qualify under the Housing Homeless Persons Act, the Housing Act and all the rest of it, who aren't local to the area or are voluntarily homeless. How do we keep a record of those, or do we know about them at all? And that's the first question. The second question is, with your letting service, where you say you'll have the option to receive housing benefit directly into your bank account, are we actually able to enforce that? Because I thought the central government requirement was that the recipient of benefits get it directly unless they're in arrears when it can be paid directly to the landlord. Perhaps you clarify. Thanks.
Well, in terms of the first question, the need that we don't know about is we don't know about it. I think some of the things that you've touched on is need that we do know about, but haven't got a legal responsibility. So we do get obviously quite a number of people that don't qualify for assistance under the homeless legislation. But I think one thing I can confidently say is that we are providing groups like that a better service now than what we did a number of years ago. I mean, our legal responsibility is advice and assistance, and that still exists. But now, in terms of the accommodation that we've got, we are beginning now to actually be able to offer accommodation to people that we've not been able to assist in the past. And again, that's predominantly through the shared housing scheme. So yeah, obviously we can't help everybody through the legislation, and I think that's where the private sector housing comes in, and saying, because so many people on the housing register will never get a social housing property, which is, there's that demand continues to be high. But obviously what we're trying to do and trying to encourage people is to think differently, stay at home, try and access private rented accommodation, and going beyond that in terms of like getting a job and supporting them with training. So I'm confident that we provide more than we used to. So I think that's the first thing. Then in terms of your second reply, I'm glad Richard's here because Richard can probably answer that better than I can.
Okay. Yeah, just to deal with that. It doesn't move, does it? Okay. We tried before. What we're looking at there is, in order to guarantee security of tenure, we are making the payment directly to the landlord. I'm not sure what exactly the literature says, but if you bear in mind the client, the client's potential history, there may be a history of rent arrears or inability to manage their financial affairs, and normally we would be looking to pay the landlord in those cases. And as a homelessness prevention measure, we generally do pay landlords directly. If, for example, we have a tenant that's referred via the bond scheme, then we generally will pay the landlord in those cases. And it's the same with the lettings agency.
In fact, the reason why I asked the question is because you've probably read in the press recently that there's a private landlord in Kent whose housing benefit payments were being paid directly to the tenants, so he gave all the 900 tenants notice to quit, and I thought that was a legal requirement to pay. Never.
It's not a legal requirement to pay. There are ways, I'm not saying there are ways around it, but there are ways in which we can pay the landlord. If it's in the landlord's interest for us to pay him or her directly, if there's a risk that the rent won't be paid to the landlord, if the claimant has an inability to manage their financial affairs, if they can be classified as vulnerable. And that's not an exhaustive list. There are many instances in which we can pay the landlord directly in order to protect the tenure.
I think that's a very useful reply, because I think there are a large number of private sector landlords out there who are reluctant to let to housing benefit tenants, because they think the rent is going to be paid to the tenant and you have to rely on the tenant then paying the rent. And I think if that was publicised, you may get more private sector landlords.
Yeah, I mean, it is a statement that I've made at the Landlord Forum. 25% of our housing benefit claims in Monmouthshire are paid directly to the landlord, to the landlord, because of the sort of right to pay them and the sort of reasons I mentioned.
Well, just yes, it's following on from Councillor Jordan's really, because my understanding was that you had to have default first before that could actually be a direct payment to the landlord. And that is certainly a deterrent to some people to putting a property and making it available. The fact that somebody can't manage their finances, or they think the rent is a low priority and ta-ta, but then you are lumbered for so many months and the landlord loses. And that's a real deterrent. So if that's going to be resolved, I think it would be very, very good.
Yeah, it is the default in the local housing allowance legislation that was introduced in 2008 and was introduced by the previous government. But, I mean, with experience and with our engagement with colleagues in housing options and landlords, we've found in certain instances it's necessary to protect the tenure. And the government actually has modified the local housing allowance regulations to allow us to pay landlords at an earlier juncture in any case. But we know in these particular instances that perhaps there's a history of difficulty in managing financial affairs, and we might be better placed to pay the landlord, and so we do it at the outset.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, sorry to keep you waiting.
That's quite all right. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Richard. Yes, a couple of follow-on ones, really. I think that's a good idea, really, that the landlord is always paid directly, because they have to upkeep of the property and so on, and that's where they need to have that income from. And obviously they don't want all the trouble of getting one out and another one in and all that upheaval. I'm just wondering, how aware are we of the number of people, because over the years they've had these different reviews of point systems, banding, and the hidden ones which are still living with family for a couple of generations because they don't come into the criteria or point scoring of banding and points to put them in any help of getting housing independently of their family because they're adequately housed. Like I know an instance where there's a couple got married, the family home was 4-bedroomed, so they went on living there because they couldn't get into any sort of housing. And I think it's very unfortunate then, and they feel it, that there are people out of the county who come in or whatever, who don't even work, some of them, and they have a priority need and they get into the housing ladder better than they do. And I think that's a great concern of a lot of people in the county, especially the younger generations. And also, even on the news this morning, there was a lot of talk about the high streets, the demise of all the shops and all so on. We see empty shops, which isn't good for the locality because of supermarkets seem to take over so much. Can we not do something more about, instead of building new houses everywhere, new housing, that we could change the category of some of the buildings on the main street so they could become flats, not just above them, but the whole building being taken on by housing associations or something, and turning it into some sort of accommodation, especially for those who sort of require not high up market penthouse executive flats, but who need to be in a built-up area because of amenities are there, they perhaps don't need a car, and all that sort of thing. We seem to just look at empty shops and nothing's ever done about it when land is not going to ever increase, and we are forever wanting to build on new land. And so I think cannot more pressure or policy be done to doing something with these empty spaces on streets? Thank you.
I think there's a couple of points in there. I think first one was in relation to the housing register. I guess the situation with the housing register is it's coming up with a policy that covers every eventuality, and I think my experience is it's virtually impossible to do that, remembering that the policy is about rationing a scarce resource, and you know it's your policy. You've got the scope to change it as long as it sits within the law as you see fit. But it's so easy to say, right, well, we'll help this group over here, and it just has a negative impact over here to another group. Now, personally, I don't think we're that far off. I think we've done a lot of work on the housing register over the years, and I'm not saying it's perfect by any means, but I think it's a lot better than it was, and it's reviewed regularly. So we reviewed it a year or so ago, and we're going to start looking at it. Well, we have started. We've started looking at it again. So hopefully we'll be bringing something to you probably after Christmas. But I think one key thing within the social housing stock, if you speak to the likes of John Keegan and co, they'll all say to you, we've got the wrong properties in the wrong place, and we've got a lot of stock that's got older people's stock, and there's been a lot of redesignation. So again, I think that's a point I tried to bring out in the report, that there's, I think it's a couple of hundred properties have been redesignated from older persons to general need. Now, that will take a while to come through, but I think what it does mean, when those properties become vacant, there is a little bit more for if you like, for younger people, if you like. So I think that's the issue with the housing register. With regards to the high street, we wouldn't disagree with you at all. We did a survey of the high streets, an empty property survey of the high streets a few years ago, and what we found was that there are quite a number of empty units above the shops. The reality is, though, to turn those properties into viable accommodation, there's a lot of money that needs spending. You've got flats that share the same access as the shops. You've got flats that don't comply with fire regulations. You've got flats that share services, gas and water and with the shop below. So there's a multitude of complexities in around that. But I mean, but you're quite right. There is a resource there, and it supports the whole place regeneration strategy as well. So you know, there is a potential, but we're not in that position yet.
Do you want to come back on your question?
Could
and then
I
we'll go
please?
to Delia, and then Councillor.
It's just that at
Dovey.
one stage, sorry, it's years now since we were starting on the empty house business, empty homes. But now it's that they used to be looking at mainly empty flats and so on, and available space above shops. But it's getting the shops themselves are empty, and so that you've got a whole block or neighbouring, and very often the same owners. You know, if you really looked into it, that they could do something about that. And I think it would sort of regenerate some of the high street as well, as using a commodity that in time just becomes dilapidated, sad looking, and then it gets on the knock-on effect of litter and everything, which doesn't help anybody. And yet it could be a good resource if we could do something about the whole building in very often cases that are empty, with the shops looking either charity shops or anything like that, and because the supermarkets take it all out of town. But it isn't so much just the flats and the availability of access and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the advantage, obviously, of having rather than looking at one on their own, looking at it together, you get a double benefit, don't you? So,
yes. Thank you very much. I've got a distinct feeling of déjà vu about that topic, and I seem to recall, but we can't find the minutes immediately. I seem to recall that we have touched on this before, and it may well be, Councillor Edwards, if I speak to you as chair of planning, it may be something that we might want to have a little bit of a think about within council. You're absolutely right about, I don't know what places you're thinking of, but there are many other locations that would testify to that. I'm very conscious that we've got other items on this agenda, and I know there are people waiting to ask questions. So I'm going to go to Delia. Did you want a question? And I know Councillor Dovey does. Then I think we're going to have to wrap this up a bit.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I congratulate you on your presentation? Very detailed, very understandable. The question I have in mind is that what's going to happen to these figures when you join forces with Torvine? Are they going to be joint figures? This may have been discussed before, I don't know, but are they going to be joint figures? And if so, what kind of effect do you anticipate the joint figures might have on your present figures?
No, at the moment we've got I'm guessing there's probably a legal duty to report as Monmouthshire, so we will have to keep a respective set of figures for each authority. I'm guessing that's probably what you did with housing benefits, is it? Yeah. So we'll continue with a dual set of figures. I would expect until local government reorganisation. But what we will be looking to do is try and highlight that there's been benefits of coming together, and that will be the key. That will be the key test. And I would guess from you as elected members that would be what you would be looking for. So that's where we're hopeful. So, and obviously the prevention figure is one that I hope would be in a better position to improve. When we do start working together properly.
Thank you. Councillor Dovey, I seem to have been chairing meetings with you wanting to come in for the last 24 hours almost.
And again?
Yes.
Leading on from what Councillor Edwards has said, we have some experience of trying to do developments involving shops. Is it not true that where these are successful, on the whole, because of the cost of doing the redevelopment, they're more successful in town centres as pretty upmarket units, because you can charge a premium price for them, which justifies the investment. So it is a more difficult thing to do for our requirements. And the second thing is, in my experience, and perhaps you can confirm I'm right or wrong, is it not true that it very often is very difficult to identify the ownership of the outlet? I mean, we have one experience where all we wanted was a public toilet, and we ended up in British Virgin Islands as part of a co-op pension arrangement, you know. So it isn't as easy as it looks, and very often these people don't know what they own because it's part of a parcel, and it can be prolonged and a pretty arduous exercise. It's a great shame, but I think it isn't such an easy solution. Do you agree with that? I'm not making a statement.
No, some of it. I mean, the reality is, I can't really comment on the high or low value areas. I guess in a perverse sort of way, it's almost easier to tackle problems that are more tangible and more obvious, because, as you say, certainly a lot of the seminars and good practice that we've experienced, again, it's very rundown areas that have been brought up, and some fantastic schemes that have really brought something to the table. But I know that a lot of those areas are like real tangible issues. Like I say, rows of accommodation that's boarded up, and and as I say, in one sense, we're fortunate that we don't have that, but nevertheless, we still obviously have Monmouthshire issues which are of a strategic priority. But going on to the owners, when we did the survey of the high streets, you're absolutely right. We tried to identify the landlords of a lot of the shops and the flats, and I don't know about the British Virgin Islands, but there were some very remote property-owning companies, and very little local. It's a bit of minefield, I can imagine.
Thank you. Those who are intrigued by this reference to the British Virgin Islands, the owner of the land in question in Chepstow was asked whether it would be willing to provide literally just a few square yards for a toilet installation. Took years to answer, and then sent us the bill for its lawyer's time in answering our question. I'm very conscious of time. Simon has two or one, I'm not sure, very, very quick points, and that I think will conclude this part of the agenda, please.
May I ask, Ian, you mentioned the online 24-hour online check-in system to see whether you're homeless, and then you quickly drifted away from that. What is the reason for that? Is there not a programme available, or it's too expensive? Second one is, you say you met your mandate for 2014-15 in your savings, which is brilliant. I didn't know whether you was going to touch on 15-16 there or not. Have you been directed to make any savings in 15-16 also? Because with the looks of where we are with the team at the moment, we got 4.5 to 8. You got one vacancy there. You did touch on that twice on the vacancy. Does that mean you're going to have to make lots of savings this next financial year coming, or will the tie-up with Torvine help with that? I don't want to touch on that too much because I will see the Cabinet report. And my last one there is, this new burdens money you're saying you'll be having off the Welsh Government, will that tie up with the Torvine one as well, or because we tie up, will we get that money also, do you know? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
The online assessment tool, is something that we need support from. Ian's written it; it's all ready to go, but we need assistance to get that through, and we've got as far as we can at the moment.
Can I come back on that one then? Assistance. Just give me a brief. And assistance in what?
Technical assistance, IT assistance.
IT. So have we sought that, or is it just coming against
still,
the brick wall?
We're still trying to sort it.
All right. Thanks.
The new burdens money. What was your question? I can't remember.
The new burdens money. You said we're having off Welsh Government for financial year coming. Was it £100,000 or something?
About that, yeah.
Yeah. Will we still be will that be Monmouthshire's money or Monmouthshire and Torvine's money?
No, it's Monmouthshire's money. We've got it's formula allocated, but we will look to, in terms of allocating that money, we'll do it with Torvine, so it will complement what Torvine do, so they won't be done in isolation. So that's that. And then in terms of the mandate, my reference in the presentation, we've got in terms of the housing options team, we had a requirement to save £55,000 over last year, this year and next year. And in terms of achieving that, we will do that. But I'm expecting obviously in the current round, we will need to make additional contributions on top of that.
So what we're saying is for financial year, instead of the 55, that they're going to be looking for a bit more in savings from yourself?
I'm expecting more on top, yeah.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I think we've given this a very, very good and thorough airing, and I'd like to thank Ian and the team for helping us with this particular part of the agenda. In terms of conclusions on this, obviously we thank you for the report. We note and we welcome progress being made in the areas that have been reported to us. We are, I think, concerned that there are still some unresolved issues. IT was brought to a committee before and was mentioned as an issue that needs to be resolved. And we must hope that somehow, Ian, you get the support that you need to get this to work. It's not the first time that a piece of innovative work by one or other of our teams has foundered or been held up on IT, and I never understand why, when I thought we had access to services that were supposed to do this sort of thing for us. Anyway, that's a point I think the committees would wish to note, that we are disappointed that the technical support which you need has not yet been forthcoming. Is that fair? Otherwise, you agree with me, the summary, that we welcome the report, we've noted the progress being made, and we look forward to hearing of further progress. Now, having said all that, when we look at the next item on the agenda, there will probably be some context to what we've just been talking about, so some of the points that we cover will not be too different. If members would like a very short 2-minute comfort break, that will give the team time to move around to get ready to take us into the next paper. Two minutes, or as they say in France, 2 minutes. Excellent. Thank you very much. We're now going to go on to the next item on discretionary housing payments policy and its implications. And Richard's going to take us through it. And he'll tell you as he goes through, but there are one or two additional bits of information which accompany the presentation for you to reflect on afterwards, perhaps.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from Ian's presentation, which I found very interesting. Actually, I didn't have the good fortune to be at the whole of Ian's presentation last year. And I'd like to thank him for his kind comments about my team, and just to reassure you that there is a great deal of interaction between Ian's team and my own. Certainly, we look very closely at individual cases. We also look at ways in which we can maximise the financial subsidies available to Monmouthshire in order to prevent homelessness. Believe it or not, there are some within the housing benefit system. There are one or two areas where we can look at things. And discretionary housing payments is an area that we've used as a form of mitigation to assist people to face up to the challenges that are faced by the welfare reforms. That's what I'm summarising within this report. It starts by going through what discretionary housing payments are. You can only qualify for a discretionary housing payment if you're already in receipt of housing benefit. So it's a top-up. And it only covers genuine liabilities, so it covers anything that can be regarded as an eligible rent cost, or additionally it can cover things like rent in advance, rent deposits, or additional lump sum costs such as removal costs. That's a provision that's been introduced in line with the spare room subsidy and the encouragement for people to move to smaller properties. There's assistance within the discretionary housing payment scheme now for them to downsize and to move to smaller dwellings. It doesn't cover things like heating costs or council tax. They're excluded from the arrangement. Discretionary housing payments were a small scheme previously, and they were the idea was that they were directed at those facing hardship or exceptional hardship. Now they're also focused on the three key measures that are contained within the government's welfare reform programme. So what I've done there is summarised the key measures: the spare room subsidy or bedroom tax, which came in April 2013. As Ian has mentioned, we haven't seen a dramatic impact upon those people going through a rent arrears process and reporting themselves as homeless. But I'd like to think that we've used discretionary housing payments as a mitigation to help them to meet part or some of the shortfall. But 611 households in Monmouthshire have been affected by the spare room subsidy bedroom tax, and the average impacts are between £9 and £25. Overall, the average impact is £13 a week. We've got one Monmouthshire resident who has successfully appealed against his under-occupation charge, and that's gone now up to the upper tribunal of the tribunal service. And the basis of his appeal was that he had 2 rooms in his property that were too small to occupy. And that case has been all over the social media, and I'm sure perhaps you're aware of the case. But we'll have to wait until early 2015 before that is heard. Pardon?
What size was he claiming?
The size of the bedrooms. The precise sizes don't come immediately to mind, but Monmouthshire's Environmental Health Service went out to look at the size of the rooms and deemed that they were only suitable for half a person, i.e. a child under the age of 10. Yeah. So that will give you an indication. We've got other changes in the benefit system that I think we've talked to you about previously. There's the household benefit cap. You may have heard the Prime Minister and the Chancellor at the Conservative Party conference recently talking about bringing this household cap down. Currently it's £26,000 per annum. We've got 18 households in Monmouthshire are affected by that, so i.e. they receive benefit entitlements over £26,000 per annum. No, this report is all about Monmouthshire. Yeah, I'm all Monmouthshire today, no references to Torvine. The other area, and an area that's had a much more of an impact in Monmouthshire than Torvine, is the private rented sector and the restrictions that have been introduced on private rented sector. And in particular, local housing allowance levels, so the benchmark levels for housing benefit have been reduced gradually over the last 2 or 3 years. And the government introduced a restriction on single people aged under 35 on the basis that they are not entitled to a one-bedroom rate for housing benefit purposes, but a shared room rate. So in Monmouthshire, the one-bedroom rate, so for anyone over 35, is £90 a week, but the shared room rate, that's for people sharing accommodation or single and under 35, is £52.50. So it's quite a big difference due to the age of the person. We didn't know when we came to see you last year what the demand would be for discretionary housing payments. And in fact, I read out some of the comments that customers had made in their declarations, because they were in a panic really about whether they would get any assistance at all. But we have been able to meet some of the demand in a targeted way for most of the customers who have applied for discretionary housing payments in Monmouthshire. And in 3.9 I illustrate our expenditure last year. So we spent £148,165. And we've got our commitments there for an expenditure for 2014-15. The way that discretionary housing payments work is we've got a permitted total from the government. That's outlined in 5.2. We've got a cash limit of 319,328 that we're allowed to spend. But central government give us only 40%. So the DWP only give us 40% of that cash limit. So if we choose to, we can spend above their 40% contribution, but only up to the level of the cash limit. So this year we get a DWP contribution of 127,731. So the remaining balance of the grant falls to the authority. Ruth may be able to comment on this as well, but the council made a decision to contribute £60,000 additionally towards discretionary housing payment expenditure in 2014-15, based upon the demand that we'd had in previous year. So in addition to the 127,731, there is an additional budgetary amount of £60,000. That's not to say we will spend all of that money, but we believe that we have sufficient finances there to meet the demand from customers based upon our expenditure last year.
The £60,000 was an additional item that was included in the medium-term financial plan for 2014-15, and it recognised the fact that there was no funding in the budget for Monmouthshire's element. As Richard says, we feel that it does cover the level of demand, but there is a small risk there for the authority. Should we have to spend to that limit of the 319,000, there would be a further £130,000 for the authority to find. As we say, we're not seeing that come through in the numbers, and we don't think it's a risk moving forward, but nevertheless, it is a potential should we ever have to spend to our limit.
Just looking at the claim process for discretionary housing payments and the demand that we've had from customers, as Ruth has just said, based upon last year's demand, we don't expect to be spending anywhere near even the provision that's been made. The number of applications for discretionary housing payments has, however, increased as an area of administration. Last year they increased by fourfold as compared to the previous year, and that's because of the demands placed upon us by the welfare reforms. And we've had a slight increase in the number of applications this year. From an administrative perspective, as I said, discretionary housing payments were a small area prior to the welfare reforms. They're now a considerable area of work for us, and they're highly complex applications. I've given you some case studies, and I will touch upon them shortly. But we have to look at the customer's income and expenditure and their ability to afford their rent. We have to make a judgment about what we can award. And as its name implies, it is discretionary. So one decision maker could have a different viewpoint to another decision maker. But we try as much as possible to comply with the council's policy and to look at things fairly and as consistently as we can. In terms of the number of applications, we've had 694 applications received to date in the current financial year. 673 have been successful. Those refused are normally because the claimant or the customer already receives full housing benefit or does not qualify for assistance because they have a sufficient income to afford their rent. And when we're looking at a discretionary housing payment application, we look at all of the income coming into the household, including the income of those that are not the claimant or the partner, non-dependents, grown-up adults within the household. There have been no formal appeals against decisions that we've made. That indicates to me that our policy is robust and that it is effective and it's fair, because there is an appeal provision. The average level of award is £10.73 per week. As I've indicated, there are some significant shortfalls in rent. One, because of the bedroom tax, average shortfall in the region of £13 a week, but also we have shortfalls because of the changes in private rented sector rents. Most of the awards that we make do not meet the full shortfall because we have limited funds available to us. But as I say, we make every effort to administer the scheme fairly. As Ian has indicated, we work closely with stakeholders such as the Council's Housing Options team. Every letter we send out about discretionary housing payments has a box on it that says if you need assistance or advice with housing, then go to the Council's Housing Options team. We offer customers who are seeking work advice about where to go to search for jobs, contact points for Job Centre Plus. We also suggest to them, if they're looking to downsize, that they go to speak to their landlord. The likelihood is, because of the shortage of available accommodation, that it's going to be difficult for them to downsize. So that's the discretionary housing payment in a brief nutshell. I've given you some case studies that perhaps bring it to life in terms of the decision-making process and the sort of people that we deal with. And perhaps I can just briefly go through them. Pardon?
Can I ask a question before you go to that? It's regarding 5.2 on your the resource implications. Could you explain the mathematics in there? You're talking about £60,000 budget increase reflects potential cross to the authority and overspends. I don't understand the sums.
Right.
Is it just me being dull?
No, I'm sure it isn't. It's there's a cash limit that Monmouthshire can spend, which is 319,328.
Yeah.
But Monmouthshire only receives a direct subsidy of 127,731. Right. So we've made a budget provision of an additional £60,000 because of the demand that we've had in the previous financial year. Yeah?
So that's 60 taken off,
All right.
Great. Just to go through these case studies then, and I hope these bring the decision-making to life and perhaps they underline the complex lives that people lead, I'm afraid. So case history 1 is a jobless single person, aged 34, living in private rented accommodation. So as he's under 35, as I said, he's hit by this shared room rate. His rent is £130 a week, but his shared room rate for housing benefit purposes is £52.50 a week. So he has to meet that shortfall in his rent. He has separated from his wife, and they have 2 children, and they're fighting a custody battle over their children. So that will also determine who's entitled to the benefits that relate to those children, tax credits and the child benefit. The children are currently residing with the mother. He needs accommodation for those children 3 nights per week because of the separation arrangement. So we've paid him a discretionary housing payment because of this custody battle and because of his need to provide accommodation for his children up to the level of what would be the 2-bedroom rate. So we're actually meeting quite a significant shortfall for that gentleman because of his extreme circumstances until the matter of the custody of his children is resolved. He was full-time employed. When we told him about the decision, he was extremely grateful to us and said that he wouldn't be necessarily relying on the benefit system for too long. But he was extremely grateful to the council that we made that decision so that he could stay within the accommodation that he is in at the moment. Otherwise, he would probably be going to Ian's team and seeking help from them. He's 35 next May, or July is it? I think in July. So he would qualify for an increased level of housing benefit from next July. Case history B is a mother of a small child. So she lives in a housing association tenancy. She has a 1-bedroom shortfall, and we are paying half of it in terms of a discretionary housing payment. Her daughter had to be removed recently because of threat of violence from an ex-partner, so her daughter's going to foster care accommodation. So then, as a result of the way the housing benefit rules work, she's now two bedrooms under-occupied as opposed to 1, because of her personal circumstances and a need to cover all of her rental outgoings. We are covering her entire rent through the discretionary housing payment scheme. She's not someone who can necessarily go and seek work at the moment, but that potentially is an option for her. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? I am on the adoption panel, so I am well aware of circumstances far worse than this even. But the question that I'd like to raise here is, where are the grandparents, or does this person come from outside Monmouthshire? And would that make a difference?
I don't know about her backstory in that respect, and you might well be right. There may be other factors that are at play here. She's actually there is potentially another a property that she's identified in another area, so she has an option to move there. But yes, she clearly has links with another area, and that possibly is the reason why. There are circumstances even more complex than the case studies, aren't there? But it's just to outline in the things that we have to consider. And as administrators and bureaucrats, we only have a limited amount of time to make these decisions, and there are often far wider considerations, as you've said.
And the child is often the main factor. Yeah.
And then the final case history just ties in a number of benefit changes. A couple who are in receipt of, one is in receipt of job seekers allowance, the other is in receipt of employment and support allowance. The lady's employment and support allowance has been awarded due to a spinal problem, but has been stopped because she failed her medical. So she doesn't get her employment and support allowance at the moment, but this is under appeal. Her husband is on job seekers allowance, but he's had a foot operation. So there are some medical issues there. They're in a housing association tenancy with a 2-bedroom shortfall due to the spare room subsidy. They don't want to move because they've got significant ties in the area. They also have these health problems. They say that they're relying on food bank vouchers, and they've got the CAB assisting them with their appeal against the employment and support allowance. They have to pay £10.73 because we're only giving them half of the rent shortfall because of the limitation of the fund. We could pay them £21.46, but we're not, and they have the amount of money coming in that I stated. The purpose of that is just to illustrate the complexity of the cases that are coming forward, and as you've indicated, there are more factors even than this, and the difficulty in actually looking at sets of circumstances like that and perhaps refusing someone help.
Okay, Councillor White.
Thank you. I can identify with all these cases because I see them in my ward regularly. What I really don't understand in the case history C, they don't wish to move because they have limited mobility and live near their daughter. That bit I can understand. Who helps them? And also their elderly parents who they care for daily. I really do not understand that, because if they have elderly parents who are much older than them, the parents will have help with carers, etc. I just find that a bit difficult.
Yeah, I mean, these are anonymised case histories, and yeah, this is what we have, but that's what someone would say within their discretionary application. Yeah.
Anybody else want to ask a question?
Only a comment on number 2, if I may, Chairman.
Okay.
It's logical, the quicker you get her into another place, the better. Then you save on the foster care, which costs it all.
I now have a question. Is it one question or two from
one.
Simon,
One
and then we can, I think, probably come to a conclusion on this.
I think that, Chair, thanks. I think it revolves around the recommendations. You did say that actually we had to find or put a request into Cabinet for another £60,000 to balance, hopefully not overspend, but balance the budget out for financial year this year. Will you be looking to put a request through for the financial year 15-16? And my last one is, you say about the working age. What is the working age? It's from 16 to 65, because that is moving as well, isn't it? We're going to be 67, aren't we? But the reason why I make that point is because a lot of people nowadays actually are being offered accommodation. You seem to be old when you're 50. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but I used to feel young one day, but I don't feel anymore when I see all these brochures nowadays. Just, can you explain that to me? I just, explanation on that, please. And the first one, the budget one, is most important.
You only have to provide an answer, not counselling.
Yeah, I just turned 50, so I fall into the category of someone who could access certain types of housing. As you said, the state retirement age is 67, but the state pension credit age is moving all the time. It's actually 62 years and around about 7 months, I think, at the moment. So they're bringing the state pension credit age up to the state retirement age gradually. So
the gender side of it as well, female and male, because that is different as well.
yes, that the idea is to equalise the two at a state retirement age of 67. With respect to the definition of older people as well, the older person's strategies and accommodation, some of it is geared towards over 50. But it's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult to be specific. Some sheltered accommodation is geared at older and 60 plus. So these definitions don't all fall into place. With respect to the budget question, we don't know what the discretionary housing payment provision is yet for 15-16, so can't give you a definitive answer to that. The contribution that we get from DWP is based upon our expenditure in previous years. So it is possible that we will have an increased contribution from DWP, but we don't know the exact position yet.
I was only basing my my question on that one. I picked that up from H Cymru when they were on the foyer there.
Yeah.
We're here to help you at 50 plus.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people out there who may want to help.
And some of the councillors said you can't be older at 50, but I went back to Age Cymru and they definitely said you're older person once you've turned 50.
Excuse me, goes against all medical
Absolutely.
When you turn 50.
Because they're now saying geriatrics start at 80. So there we are.
Honestly?
Absolutely ridiculous.
No,
Councillor
well,
Eason,
Yeah, like,
I think
that's
Councillor
the
Smith wanted to
policy,
come in.
yes.
I'd like to make a reflective comment.
I don't think there's any restriction. With the spare room charges, it's possible for tenants to actually take in the lodger in housing association, whatever, accommodation.
Yeah, we say in the report that 21 Monmouthshire residents have taken in a lodger. That is a possible option that's available. We say that in our letters when we send out discretionary award notices. We say you have the option to find work, if work's available, increase your income, take in a lodger, downsize to a smaller property, etc., etc.
Some tenancies sometimes say no sublet agreement or whatever.
Yeah, the RSLs are comfortable with the tenants taking in lodgers.
Councillor Eason?
Yeah, my comment is really reflective on the comment you just made on 3.13. The 21 tenants have taken in a lodger. After the First World War, there were lots of widows around, and it was a stigma to get remarried. And there was a tendency, for the reasons you've got on here, for those widows to take in lodgers, to pay rent expenses. It was a stigma to get remarried. You didn't get remarried, it was a stigma to take in lodgers. I hope we're not going back to that sort of time where 90 years ago it was the only way you could pay your rent.
Thank you for that historical observation.
That's true. That's fact,
Alan Wintle, Councillor Wintle.
Thank you. There's a problem with downsizing. There's no downsized accommodation for them to move to. So they're between a rock and a hard place on that one. So I can't see why you're recommending downsizing when they can't do it.
I'm just providing the scheme on behalf of the Department for Work and Pensions, right? And unfortunately, the limitation on housing stock is out there, and you will find that and for the many of the same applicants applied for discretionary assistance last year as applied this year, and they weren't able to find any alternative accommodation.
Okay, well, of course there are options for us as a council. We could be investing, we could be buying up some of these empty properties, we could be entrepreneurial, etc., etc. But now is perhaps not the time to do that. We need to take a view now on this paper. We thank Richard for his presentation and his explanation. And by the way, the case studies do add to it, and we must make sure that Richard and Hazel leave the meeting with a copy of it for the purposes of the minutes. But what I'd like us to do, if we could please, is to move to a decision. We were given a recommendation that we review the report and make any amendments or recommendations it deems appropriate. So firstly, before I turn to Simon to sort of formulate a motion, does anybody want to propose any amendments? I would guess not from the discussion, but I have to ask that. So in which case then we need to make a recommendation on this policy. Simon, would you like to formulate what that recommendation might be? Because I think you also want to take into account one of the things we've touched on the finance side.
I think that members review this report against the council's policy and administrative commitments and make any amendments or recommendations it deems appropriate. A recommendation 1 or 1A I would believe you would agree with, or the committee will agree, is that if there is a shortfall or the WDP do not top up monies, that we take monies or you apply to Cabinet for the shortfall to be made as quickly as possible. Yeah.
So that's a proposal that we endorse the policy and we add that rider. Is everybody content with that? Marcy, get your hand up and say yes. Okay, Richard, is that clear to you, or do you want us to tweak it a bit for the record?
So should we call it 2, bullet point 2? So you've got 2.1, then 2.2, or get Richard to just write that down. You got that? Yeah. But we can't give you anything else.
Are we giving you enough to take away to justify your contributions this afternoon? Thank you very much indeed. And can I thank members of both committees for their dedication. Some of us, I think, are, if I say flagging, I'm not being too wide of the mark, and it's not any reflection on our presenters this afternoon. If we did appear to be dozing off, it's partly because some of us have been sort of scrutineered out, or whatever the word is. But thank you. Always a pleasure to have you here. I've got a request or a question.
There was another thing we did mention. You were talking to the chairman of planning.
Oh yes,
about the properties.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much for reminding me. We need to capture that there should be a discussion, perhaps initially between the chair of the committee chairs and the chair of planning, to see if there was any way we could take forward some of these issues with the help of the planning committee. Thank you very much for reminding me about that. Have I forgotten anything else apart from coming this morning?
No.
Councillor Wintle.
I understand we're getting paid for 13 hours a week, our standard rate, but most of us have gone well over those 13 hours this week. Do we get overtime?
Thank you, Councillor Wintle. Can I suggest you join a union?
Yes, comrade.
Before you go, you must realise that the independent remuneration panel has advised that there will be no increase in allowances next year.